What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Pat Cave. Today we're going to be talking about my September wrap-up. I read about 5 books total, including 1 graphic novel, so we're going to get into it right after this. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Pat Cave. Yep. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Pat Cave. We're going to go ahead and take a look at some of the books I read in September. Extra points to you if you can guess what my Halloween costume is from. I'm sure a lot of people might know. That's a little hint for you. If anyone was struggling to get the costume that I wore in the last video I did, it was Sawyer from Lost, from the pilot episode. I didn't think anyone would be able to figure it out because it's so subtle. If you did, hats off to you. So, first book that I finished in September last month was Mr. Magic. This was a book that's about a children's show that aired 30 years ago. It's kind of like Mr. Rogers, but with more of a horror twist to it. I really enjoyed this book. It's by Kiersten White. She did another book called Hide, which I started and I didn't ever finish that one. I couldn't really get into it, but I enjoyed this one thoroughly. I thought it was great. It had a lot of kind of just strange Twilight Zone feels to it. If you like the idea of a urban legend, it's kind of like an urban legend. So Mr. Magic was a children's show. It aired 30 years ago, but nobody seems to really remember much about it. There's little entries throughout the book that are about like Wikipedia entries and things people think they remember, but nobody can seem to find any footage from it or any definitive answers. And the book centers around one of the circle of friends, which are the kids that were the stars of the show, and there was different waves of the circle of friends. And this particular book focuses on the last group of kids before the show ended and the circumstances surrounding their exit from the show. If you like horror, urban legends, that kind of stuff, I definitely recommend checking this book out. Next book that I read was Suckerville from Chris Sorensen, who's a friend of mine. He's a great author. He did the Nightmare Room, the Messy Man series. And this book is about J.D. Spears, who has lost his wife during pretty much the worst time in his life. Leech people show up and begin to take over. I guess I should say parasites that are leeches. Turn them into they're like parasites that sort of take over the people, and the people try and take over more people. Kind of reminded me of The Faculty, but not quite as, that was more of like stealth type aliens taking over. This is more like in your face. The leeches are coming for you, the leech people. But yeah, that was a good one too. I really enjoyed it. If you like funny horror, it's got some great like comedy in there too. A couple moments that were really enjoyable. I would get that one. And definitely check out his Messy Man series if you can. Next up, we've got Daphne by Josh Malerman. I've read a lot of Josh Malerman's books. Bird Box was the very first one that I ever came across when the movie came out, or that was shortly before the movie came out when I heard it was going to be a movie. But Bird Box was sort of it wasn't my favorite book that he wrote, but it was a really good book. And then this was, God, he's probably written maybe 10 or more by now, I would guess. Daphne is about an urban legend. It centers around a character named Kit Lamb and a girls basketball team, and Daphne is sort of an urban legend, a woman who's 7 feet tall, freakishly big. Daphne, who is sort of this mythical figure, legendary, but nobody seems to talk about her, but when they do start to talk about her, it sort of makes her real, and she kind of shows up. This was a fun read. It took me a little longer than I wanted it to. I can't say what it is that I wasn't crazy about with this book. A lot of his other books I really, really enjoyed. This one, for some reason, I had a hard time getting into. Spoiler alert, but a lot of the chapters center on people who are getting killed off before you get to really know much about them, and I think that kind of made it hard for me to connect with some of the characters. But if you like urban legends, like the Candyman, that sort of thing, this book would definitely be for you. I would check it out for sure. And just for the record, his favorite book that I've read was called The Ghoul in the Cape. And I'll do a separate review for that book at some point. And I'll go ahead and read the synopsis for this one. It's the last summer for Kit Lamb, the last summer before college, the last summer with her high school basketball team and with her best friend, the last summer before her life begins. But the night before the big game, one of Kit's teammates tells a ghost story about Daphne, a girl who went to their school for many years ago and died under mysterious circumstances. Some say she was murdered, others say that she died by her own hand, and some say that Daphne is a murderer herself. They also say that Daphne is still out there, obsessed with revenge, and will reappear to kill again anytime someone thinks about her. As her teammates vanish one by one, Kit begins to suspect that the stories about Daphne are real and to fear that her own mind is conjuring the killer. Now it's a race against time as Kit searches for the truth behind the legend and learns to face her own fears before the summer of her lifetime becomes the last summer of her life. This next read was a graphic novel, manga, Junji Ito's Frankenstein. This is a reimagining of Frankenstein, the original story by Mary Shelley. And I actually liked how they changed this up. It's not exactly the same as that story was. They took a lot of liberties with it. And I'm kind of glad they did because, you know, retreading the same story so many times and retelling it so many different ways, you got to keep it fresh and interesting somehow. This has some fantastic artwork like all his other books do. It also has another story that kind of reminded me of this old horror movie called House 2. That one, there's like a story within after the Frankenstein section of this ends, there's another story about a kid who has almost like a gateway in his house and all sorts of weird stuff's going on with that. So I thought that was really cool, and I enjoyed those little stories in there. So that's another one you want to pick up if you're a fan, and if you're a fan of Junji Ito, I would definitely get that. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I like to think that I am, but who the hell knows. And finally, we come to my last read, Fourth Wing. This is a book about Violet Sorrengail, who is a dragon rider, or who gets accepted into the Dragon Riders Academy at her school. And there's different quadrants. There's the scribes, who are sort of like the historians. There's the healers, the infantry, and then the Dragon Riders. And the Dragon Riders have the highest mortality rate. Barely any of them get out of the school. They die before they finish it. And Violet was set to be a scribe, and her mother forces her into the dragon program. And this book was freaking awesome, I thought. I don't read fantasy books usually ever. I didn't read Lord of the Rings, a lot of the biggest ones. I've read a couple here and there, but not very many. But I had seen everyone raving about this, so I picked it up, and I thought it was incredible. I mean, Iron Flame comes out in November. I'll do a separate review on this book. There's just so much to go into on it, so I'm going to save that for another time. Thus concludes my reads for September. Go ahead and keep an eye out for my next video. I'm going to try and do the rest of the Man Cave unveiling, which you've already seen it, but I'll show kind of how I set up everything in there. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.